You're watching That Lovell-Boland Live. If this is the first time you're seeing us, I'm Sam.
I'm Rianne, and today we're going to be busting misconceptions about Singapore.
We're about to enter our 5th year here as expats in the Lion City, so what better way to celebrate than to demyth the notions of Singapore that we held when we were living in KL.
Yeah, and I think before we moved, we maybe had some preconceived notions of what it's going to be like in Singapore. For example, I thought you couldn't chew gum here, which is actually not true. You can, but it's just not very widely sold in Singapore.
Another thing, because we both grew up in the UK, there was one dish that people would think would be Singaporean, but it's not, and that's Singapore noodles. It's just not a thing.
Not a thing, yeah. So those were just a couple of examples to give you a taster of what's to come. But before we crack on, do like this video. It just helps other people find us, and subscribe if you haven't already. Right, let's get to it.
Myth number 1 is that Singapore is expensive, and I have to say, 4 years of living here, it's kind of a yes and a no.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying Singapore is one of the most expensive cities to live in, but it really doesn't have to be. I mean, for example, we live in an HDB out in the heartlands, which is way cheaper than living in a condo, for example.
And another thing is food. You can go out and eat at really expensive Michelin-starred restaurants, or alternatively, you can go to the hawker centres where you can get chicken rice for like $3, you can get char kway teow for like $4 a plate. So again, you can get the high-end stuff and it can be ridiculously expensive, and you can get the low-end stuff cheaper than like if you're going out for a meal in the UK.
And even cheaper than buying the ingredients yourself at the supermarket or the wet market. So there's always different ways to get around the expensive label which Singapore has.
But I have to say, there is one thing that we felt when we lived in KL and when we were here in Singapore that is expensive. It is a lot more expensive than you'd find in the UK, for example, and that is alcohol.
Yeah. He's been dying to bring that out and show you. But yeah, no, definitely the sin tax, which is hiked onto or put onto alcohol, really does make drinking, even just at home, quite expensive in comparison to somewhere like the UK. Myth number 2 is that Singapore is a concrete jungle.
Yeah, I have to admit that when we first moved to Singapore, this is something that I truly believed, because I think when you first move to a place, you do go to the tourist spots, and a lot of them, like especially in central Singapore, Orchard Road, all them sort of things, they are basically the concrete jungle. But when we moved to our first HDB, it was right in a heartland, right next to a park, and I think that really changed my mindset about Singapore.
Yeah, I think it's quite easy to think that there's just skyscrapers and HDB blocks, but actually we have been really surprised to see how much greenery there is. We go on hikes all the time. If you haven't seen some of our hike videos, we'll put a link here. And you know, there's botanic gardens, which we're hoping to do a video there soon. McRitchie Reservoir, Bukit Timah Nature Reserve, you know, the list goes on. Coney Island, all the different islands.
Yeah.
You know, it is actually full of greenery, and like Sam said, for such a small space, they do make sure that there is a lot of nature right here on the island. So that's definitely a myth we found to be not true here in Singapore.
Myth number 3 kind of leads on from what we were just saying, and that is that Singapore is small and there's nothing to do.
Yeah, we have been here on Singapore, on the island, the main island, I should say, for nearly 2 years now, because obviously the borders are closed currently due to the pandemic. We never really thought that we would ever be in this situation, but I think because of that, we've actually found a lot of things to do. So for example, last month we went to Pulau Ubin, and it felt like a completely different place to Singapore. And doing research for this, we found out that there's actually 64 islands that make up Singapore.
Yeah, so we kind of have like this whole new landscape to explore. I think that's one of the beautiful things about this channel, is that we're learning so much about Singapore, and we have to thank some of our subscribers for that. Some of the comments that we get every week teaches us new things about Singapore, from the food, from the culture, and just extra things that we can do and things that we can learn.
Yeah, I think you found out where Ulu is.
Yeah. Nope, such place.
Yeah, and it's great because especially now we're really exploring Singapore, as Sam said, and going to try new things and experiences, which probably we wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the pandemic. So there is always a silver lining in situations like this, I guess.
Yeah, and like I said, we have been helped so much by subscribers, and if you aren't subscribed to this channel and you want to comment below, that would always be appreciated. But also, if you want to subscribe, then we're going to be even happier.
So myth number 4 is that Singapore is definitely not a part of China.
Yeah, and I want to clarify, at the start of this video we said these are misconceptions that we had before we moved to Singapore. But I have to say this was not on our list. This is not something that we thought of Singapore because we did live in KL. We lived in England before that, but obviously we knew that Singapore was not part of China.
This is something that we came across a lot in our research, that actually a lot of people did think that Singapore was part of China, and it's something that actually was brought up in Crazy Rich Asians, which someone was an extra in.
Yeah, the scene got cut, so let's not talk about that. But yeah, Singapore is about a 6-hour flight from China. It's so far away, so I don't understand where this came from.
No, not really sure where that came from. So just to clear it up, it's just below Malaysia, its own island itself, nowhere near China.
Finally, myth number 5, lions are not native to Singapore.
It's something that we never really thought about because Singapore literally translates to the Lion City, but there aren't lions here. But there is an interesting legend behind that Prince Sang Nila Utama thought that he saw a lion in Singapore. So that's sort of the story of why he wanted to call Singapore the Lion City. But yeah, now they've sort of debunked that it was most likely to be an Asian tiger. But even so, Singapore still remains the Lion City. We still have our national icon, which is the merlion. And, you know, we live here in the Lion City with pride, even though there aren't any lions. But maybe if you go to the Singapore Zoo, you might see one, but not native here.
So there we go, that was 5 myths about living here in Singapore, or the Lion City as we've just found out, that we hope we've debunked. If there is anything on your list that we have missed out, any myths that you think we should know about, then please comment below.
Thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate every time you come back to our channel. Do leave us a comment, as Sam said, and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you on the next one.